You really can learn a lot the second time you watch something.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama, AHSA's radio network. Luke Robinson, that's me, and Jimmy Stein's Bama Online, that's him. Bama Online's Jimmy Stein. If it's Jimmy Stein's Bama Online, that's news to several people.
Especially Tim Watts.
I want to thank you everydayers for chiming in and being around, and all you newbies, y'all are the best too. Y'all are all awesome. And Jimmy, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and we got a new sponsor I can't wait to tell you about. Oh, I'm so happy about this. All right. Right now, though, Jimmy, we're going to talk about you've been doing a lot of whiskey rewatch, and been a lot of interesting things have come up.
One thing, doing a lot of whiskey.
Yeah. There's one thing that's come up and maybe you were going to go there naturally, but you know who had a good game that it doesn't feel like he had a good game on first glance is Kendrick Law. That man hustled his tail off.
Yeah. Nick Sheridan watched, and I watched Nick Sheridan's press conference today. The Tide offense coordinator meets with the media around noontime on Mondays, and he was asked about K-Law's performance, and he raved. And you would think from the way he talked about him that he caught 7 balls for 140 yards, but no. Kendrick Law didn't catch any balls at all. But he is easily Alabama's most physical presence outside, and he helps spring numerous plays throughout the game. There's no question. He's very good without the ball. And, that's a great compliment we often hear in basketball. When you ask a basketball coach who his favorite player on the team is, he'll often tell you about a guy who he says is really good without the ball. It's football too, right? Even for a skill position player. So, yeah, don't get frustrated by K-Law not being too productive in terms of catches. He's still a significant player on this team and a big reason for the success. So, good call there. Oh, are you muted, or do we have a Wi-Fi?
No, y'all muted.
Sometimes we don't have a Wi-Fi.
I thought you had more. I'm trying to make it where we're on the same level.
Catch a Wi-Fi every now and then.
I'm trying really hard to make it where you and I are on the same level. Like I was sitting up much taller than you, which if people saw us, that would be the way it is. But
right.
For the purposes of this, I need to be your size. So like I'm in this True by Hilton thing, and I had to anyway. So Jimmy, I would say
it's pretty bad though right now that we're the same size, and apparently you're sitting down and I'm standing up.
That is bad.
Humiliating.
We're both taller than Kendrick Law, though.
Not really.
No, you're
not me.
You're not. But anyway, I just saw some highlights of his hustle, and I just think it needs to be brought up because again, I've seen so many people in the comments recently have said, "Hey, we got to get Kendrick Law more involved." Now, by the way, if this weren't a Ryan Williams podcast, it'd be a Jalen Milroe podcast. Then it'd be a Kendrick Law podcast because that's probably the one guy we talk about third most on the whole team.
I love Kendrick Law, but we just can't. He just hasn't been a productive wide receiver yet, and I do think a lot of that's on him. It's not like there aren't productive receivers. Last year, Isaiah Bond and Jermaine Burton were very productive. This year, Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams have been very productive. It's not like it doesn't exist in the Alabama offense. The thing is, though, Alabama hasn't thrown it a ton. One of the things I'm going to look at, I'm going to really jump into statistics later this week, Luke, through a 3-week. And I think it's literally how the games have played out. I predicted Alabama would throw it 33 times a game. There hasn't been anything close to that yet. But a lot of that's because this is the way the games have played out. They've been blowout wins, largely. And there just hasn't been a ton of pass attempts. And for all those that, hey, we got to throw it to this guy, we got to throw it to this guy, there literally has to be math here. There has to be enough throws to go around.
Is somebody like using scissors in the background or something? I'm hearing something scratching. Maybe not. Okay. Maybe it's in my room.
It was kind of spooky. Which one of those bad guys had like the scissor hands, but not Edward Scissorhands? He wasn't a bad guy. Was it Krueger?
Wolverine? Is that what you're thinking of?
Krueger?
Who? Oh, Freddy Krueger, yeah. Well, if somebody's behind me, tell me. Or I guess I could see him in the camera. It doesn't matter. But so we were talking about guys that stood out a little more on the rewatch. Who else besides Kendrick Law? And again, that was just my 2 cents.
This doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I'm just throwing this in there because I'm literally doing the rewatch when I took a pause to record the show here with Luke. And the last guy that made a really good run stop was Jordan Renaud in the fourth quarter. And, that's not a name we mentioned much because he hasn't played much, but we know he's a future star. So I just saw Jordan Renaud make a good play. But in terms of guys that stood out with the ones all the way through, I want to talk about the offensive line first. I'll tell you who was fantastic. Caden Proctor, which is probably the best game he's played since he's been at Alabama, which is a great sign. I don't know that Proctor missed a block the entire day. Another guy who just doesn't miss, Luke, and this is such good news for Alabama, is Parker Brailsford. He is extremely consistent. It's not exactly bowling people over and making pancakes all over the place, but Parker Brailsford consistently gets people blocked up front. We know Booker's good. We know that. He was good again. Pritchett played good, but on the rewatch, he did miss a handful of times. There was a handful of times that it wasn't a great play by Proctor, but for the most part, he was really good. Jaden Roberts has been quite consistent too. The Alabama offensive line playing well as a whole. I love that the staff named them the offensive line or the offensive line player of the week was the whole line. And I really like that. I'd also say that the two primary tight ends that block, CJ Dupree and Robbie Oust, when I did the rewatch, they block extremely well. They don't miss much either. Those guys are very consistent, and sometimes Dupree can be flat out dominant. Jam Miller also played extremely well, so that's kind of a review of the offense. Y'all know Milroe did. That's no news flash.
Okay, one other thing I wanted to go back to. I interrupted myself, so I lost my train of thought. But you were talking about you thought we'd throw it 33 times a game. I thought we'd throw it more too. Obviously, we aren't. I wonder how much of that is a product of the new clock system. Now, again, I'm just spitballing here because I just came up with this. So it's not like this is some well thought out thesis. You might be able to debunk this or bunk this. That's a whole Seinfeld debate. If something is bunked, then you debunk it. But anyway. So anyway, okay. If you're more worried about ball control, maybe you want to run the ball, set up the run so that you have a better feel for the clock. That's sort of like, I was going to say sort of like the pros do, but of course they throw it all over the field too now. Gosh, I don't know. I don't know why we aren't throwing it more. It feels like we should be.
I think it's because of the big leads. There just hasn't been.
But are they big leads? Jimmy, it was 14-3 late in the second, and we threw it twice to make it 21-3. Then against South Florida, it's 14-13 or whatever into the fourth. So maybe they haven't been big leads.
You didn't have a big lead against South Florida, but you did in the first two games various times. And I do agree that the clock has something to do with it. Now, let's keep in mind, these clock rules are really last year's clock rules, but they do affect the number of plays in the game. Last year, plays in the game were down across the nation. They were down in Alabama games. So, yes, that is a factor. I think the lead is a factor. I also think, like we said all summer long, Luke, is that DeBoer's reputation as kind of being an air raid offense or air DeBoer isn't 100% accurate. I mean, he's going to build it around what works best. And we knew the running back was a major strength of this team with Justice Haynes and Jam Miller. So, and to say nothing of the fact that Milroe, he's pretty good with the ball in his hands too. So I think it's a combination of all of it. Plays down, emphasis on running game. Number 3, I do believe they have thrown it more, but the way the games have played out haven't lent itself to a 33 passing attempt game just yet. But here comes Georgia. I think we're more likely to see it against Georgia.
And I want to talk about Jalen Milroe and talk about Jalen Milroe and Georgia when we come back, but I got some cool stuff to tell you guys. Oh, yes. Look, I'm really excited about this, Bama fans, I promise you. All fans, anybody who's listening. Have you heard about ROY? It stands for Return on You, and it's a new platform that lets you, the fans, get involved in NIL like never before by making contributions directly to your favorite athletes. By supporting players directly, you can help shape rosters, retain talent, and keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. As you know, NIL has changed the game for athletes. Roy changes the NIL game for fans. Here is some cool stuff about Roy and why it's different. Directly support players. Roy allows fans to directly back their favorite college athletes. With Roy, fans can play a key role in shaping the future of their favorite teams, while athletes maximize their name, image, and likeness potential. Exclusive content access is something that's a benefit from this too. When fans contribute to a successful campaign, they receive access to exclusive content from the athletes, such as their announcement decision, behind the scenes footage, and other personal reflections, all of which are available only to the fans who supported that particular athlete. There are no risk contributions. This is key. Fans' contributions are securely held and are only distributed if the athlete makes the decision that aligns with the fans' support. If not, the money is returned to the fans. That's awesome. Engage with athletes on their NIL journey. By using Roy, fans not only support athletes financially, but also become a part of their name, image, and likeness journey, helping them succeed. Download Roy for iOS or Android and enter referral code Locked On, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000. You win the sweepstakes. Visit and join Roy.com for additional details. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Get the Roy app for iOS and Android and start making an impact on your favorite team. Get off the sidelines and get into the NIL game with Roy. And Jimmy, I wasn't kidding. I'm really excited about this Roy stuff. I've talked to these folks. They're on top of their game. I'm telling you, they're good. And this is going to be cool. And look, yeah, you can contribute directly to Ryan Williams. You can contribute directly to Jalen Milroe. And you can contribute directly to Parker Brailsford or whoever you want to. Anybody. And it doesn't have to be, I don't have, $5,000, $10,000 to give. If you want to give $5, if you want to give $10, download the app, people. You're going to love it. I mean, I can't wait. I'm down. I didn't know that this was the week we were launching it. So
the money back feature is incredible. I mean, the money back feature, meaning that if, for instance, you contribute a certain amount to Ryan Williams and then Ryan Williams transfers out and doesn't any longer play for Alabama, you get your money back.
That's incredible. It's incredible.
But the whole thing blows me away on 50,000 levels.
All right. Well, I don't know if our guys are going to get rich off of us, but they're going to be able to buy a hamburger off of me. You can bet on that. So, Jimmy, let's go back.
Burgers on Luke.
Burgers on.
Your generosity knows no bounds within the McDonald's menu.
Okay. So Jalen Milroe wins SEC Player of the Week. He is co-SEC Player of the Week. By the way, I hate that.
Just pick
grow up here and pick somebody. Yes, you're going to make somebody mad. I understand. And sometimes it'll be a Bama fan. And he might come and kill the shrubbery at the SEC office. But so be it. You've got to be a man about these things. And you can't just say, my co-player of the week. I mean, we could do that. Why don't you just say every team has a player of the week?
Yeah, that reeks of participation trophy nonsense. Pick one. I mean, it's just pick one. I don't care if you disappoint me. I pick one.
Yeah, that's right. Now, let's go back to Jalen Milroe and Georgia here for a minute. When I was watching Georgia, Kentucky, the one thing that stood out to me, Georgia knew Kentucky couldn't pass. Kentucky knew Kentucky couldn't pass. They can't pass. They're just not good at passing the American football. I love what's the kid's name that I like, Jimmy, their wide receiver? Barian
Brown.
Barian Brown. And I love him. I wanted him to go to Alabama. I wish he was at Alabama now because I think he's awesome. I think he's wasting his talent.
He probably wishes he was too with their current lack of passing offense.
Okay, so here's what gives me a lot of hope now that I've thought about it some more. If Georgia, with all their talent, and it is an incredible amount of talent, and Kentucky, who doesn't have nearly as much talent, and that same Kentucky team just lost at home 31-6 to South Carolina. If Georgia knew they had to run and Kentucky knew they had to run, and Georgia still couldn't stop it, great. Now, give Georgia credit. Kentucky didn't cross the goal line. But I would say Alabama's running backs are better. Alabama's quarterback is clearly better, and Alabama's offensive line is better. That gives me a lot better feeling about this whole thing. And then what I don't like, though, is ESPN's game predictor says Alabama's like a 67% chance to win this. I think that's way high. I think this is a coin flip at best for Alabama. I really do.
I'm with you. I like the coin flip thing. I mean, I haven't even really decided how I'm picking this game. I agree with Luke that the way Georgia looked against Kentucky is helpful. I think Alabama probably learned something from the tape. I also think that you go on the road in the SEC and things like this happen. I don't read too deeply into it. Anyone that looks at it and says, well, we know that Georgia's just simply one play better than Kentucky. We all know that's not true. That was just, hey, this is what happens when you go on the road sometimes. So I wouldn't read too deeply into it, but Alabama's learning something from that film. Georgia's not invincible by any means. I don't think this Georgia team is better than the 21 or 22 teams. I think they're roughly what they were a year ago. I think losing Bowers and McCaffrey is a blow. And I do question their playmaking outside, not in the sense that I question it as in they don't have playmakers outside. That's not true. I just don't know that they're as good as they were, without Bowers and McCaffrey. So I think it's going to be tight, though, Luke. I mean, one thing's for sure. I don't know which way I'm going to pick it, but if I pick Alabama to win, it probably won't be by more than 3 or 4 points. If I pick Georgia to win, won't be by more than 3 or 4 points. I think this is a 60-minute game decided in the final minute, and whoever loses the game will still be favored to make the college football playoff.
Yeah, I put in the little sidebar there. What is going on during the bye week? What is going on during the bye week? Because I'm going to be racking my brain trying to figure out how this game's going to play out. And that's the great thing about college football is you don't really know till it's over. But this game fascinates me. I think there's so many undertones and subplots to this game that it's clearly not only the best game of this week, that coming weekend, but it's the best game of the year. And frankly, I'm so ready to move this week out of the way and this weekend out of the way and just let's get at it, man. I think the Alabama-Georgia game is the thing, and that's what everybody's looking forward to. When we come back, Jimmy, I want to talk a little bit about some miscellaneous stuff. One really sad note from the NFL that just hurts my heart. But, of course, I want to tell you about FanDuel because FanDuel is the best. I love it. You love it. And you've heard us talk about a lot about it. America's #1 sports book. That's FanDuel. Well, we have something a little different for you this time, y'all. Now through November 22nd, and that's coming up, shortly, in about a week. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. And you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com to download FanDuel. And, of course, FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. So we are a college football show, but Alabama's got so many alums in the NFL, it's certainly worth talking about. And Bryce Young has been benched. This is probably for the best. I mean, his confidence seems, like I said, an all-time low. I tried to watch him the other day, and he just looks like a shell of his former self. And part of it is he does not have any pieces around him. Part of it is he's at a organization that just doesn't really seem to care about winning right now. And I just think back to God. I remember when I said this when the Prancers traded for him. I almost wish it had been any other team that had traded for him, any other team. But think about this. What if the Panthers had traded up to the #1 pick and gotten C.J. Stroud and Bryce had gone to Houston? I think the career paths would have a similar arc to what they do now.
Oh, you think? So you think Bryce would still be struggling in Houston?
No. I think similar to like if he were in Houston, he'd have an arc similar to C.J. Stroud.
Right.
If C.J. Stroud were in the Panthers, he'd have an arc similar to Bryce Young.
I just know that when you play quarterback, it's so much easier to look good when the players around you are great. Yeah. I mean, Mac Jones. Mac Jones is an example in terms of Mac Jones in 2020 as the quarterback of that Alabama football team. playing with one of the great offensive groups ever put together. That sick wide receiver core, Najee Harris at running back, that awesome offensive line that was just NFL tackle to tackle. Just one of the great offensive groups in college football history. And Mac looked phenomenal, almost won a Heisman, 15th pick in the draft. And I think now we've seen in the NFL, he's certainly a good player. Wouldn't be in the NFL, still wouldn't be even a QB2 in the NFL if he wasn't a good player. He's good, but I think it's fair to say that 2020 offense at Alabama sort of lifted him up. You know, the rising tide lifts all the boats. Hey, the opposite's true too. When you're surrounded by bad players, when you don't have playmakers outside, when you don't have a running back that can take the heat off of you, when your offensive line is shaky at best, it's just impossible to look good. You can't look good. And I do think that Bryce probably had this coming. I'm not being a Bammer homer here and excusing Bryce. He's been bad. Bryce has been bad. As a matter of fact, this past weekend, he was pressured less than any quarterback that played on this past Sunday and still had that bad game. So it is time to give someone else a shot and have Bryce watch the game from the sidelines. Hopefully this is something that's going to help Bryce down the road. But boy, that Panthers team is just ick. And hey, they might play a little better with a veteran like Andy Dalton, who literally is, I think, career-wise underrated.
Sure.
And he's been around the block, and that's coach on the field stuff that's so valuable at that level. But hey, Andy Dalton's not going to. The Panthers are picking number one again next year, Luke. They'll be number one in April again. It'll be interesting to see if they pull a Bears, trade Bryce, and pick a quarterback.
You know, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. And I think it could work out for Bryce. I think it could work out for another team. And I think it could work out for the Panthers. Although I'm not sure the Panthers will ever work out for the Panthers the way they're run right now. There were about 72 people at that stadium.
I still get upset what I just talked about. I get upset every time. And I don't know why I get this upset about the Falcons. I don't really care about the Falcons. But what if the Falcons, like I wanted them to do, which I thought was so logical, what if the Falcons traded next to nothing and picked up Justin Fields, hometown Justin Fields? He goes to Atlanta. They get it. What Pittsburgh got him for like a 5th round pick. So they'd have Justin Fields at quarterback, and the 8th pick, they'd be free to get whoever they want. Add Justin Fields at quarterback and Dallas Turner to the Falcons. Now you got a young quarterback. Now you got a pass rusher. Anyway, it's just infuriating. So it just reminded me of that one. I'm like, let's see if the Panthers do the same thing the Bears did. But there'd have to be a Caleb Williams. I think there's a few interesting quarterbacks in this draft, Luke, but I don't know that there's a Caleb Williams out there. I don't know that you trade Bryce and build it around Carson Beck when your team's bad.
Well, let me ask this: how good has Caleb Williams been? I'm not trying to.
He wasn't that great last night.
He didn't. Did he have a touchdown pass in the first game?
I believe he may have in the first game against the Titans, but
I know they scored 2 defensive touchdowns because I had the Bears.
Maybe he didn't. I know he did last night.
Touchdowns this year.
He was rough last night. Now that Texans defense was really good, but yeah, he's off to a typical rookie start in this league.
Well, I mean, here's his QBR rating is 21.4. His passing yards is 174 over 2 games, and he's got 0 touchdowns. Now he's 1-1. I mean, that's got to count for something. But I mean, Bo Nix has been god awful. And again, it's funny, we demand excellence from these guys right off the bat, and the Bears will start bailing on this kid. Denver will start bailing just like they bailed on Bryce.
Nothing that we don't do as college football fans either.
Yeah, we do.
and those guys are even younger. But no, that's exactly right. Jaden Daniels is playing pretty well for the Commanders.
He did okay yesterday, but he had some bad moments. I watched some of that game for no reason. Oh, I know why. I was on an airplane, and that's the only option I had. So, but Jimmy, a couple other things. I didn't realize it was Edric Hill that dropped what would have probably been an interception for a touchdown, I guess, or maybe it could have been called a fumble. I guess probably an interception for Alabama. I didn't realize that was him.
Playing a lot of players. Playing a lot of players. Like I said, the last play I watched right before I came on the air with you here was Jordan Renaud making a tackle on 2nd down and forcing a 3rd down.
And one other thing I wanted to bring up that's just sort of apropos of nothing about us, but Tennessee, Oklahoma this weekend is must-watch TV for me because Oklahoma is a 7-point dog. That's the largest dog they've been since Texas Tech in 1998 came to Oklahoma, largest home dog. And I mean, look, I feel like Tennessee's going to rout them too. I do, but I felt Georgia was going to rout Kentucky. You know, things are crazy sometimes. Everybody thought Alabama, Wisconsin was. Barrett Sallee came on and said, I can't believe Alabama's giving up 16 points. That's nuts. And then, you know, he had to come on the show Sunday and say, uh-oh, my bad. So, I mean, we missed, but boy, that's 7 points. Seems so low.
At least 14. I think Tennessee's going to win 14, 17, maybe even 20 points. But like you said, going on the road, that could be a big difference.
And it is the first SEC game, so you know they're going to be hype.
Sure.
But they might be hype-pulled.
Oklahoma's looked bad early. Tennessee's looked great, but it's college football. The Lou Holtz quote. Coach a different team every week.
Well, and also you and I have a quote. You play your best a couple times a year and you play your worst a couple times a year, and everything in between is what you are. So maybe Oklahoma's just done all their worst so far.
I think they're just finding their footing with Jackson Arnold, who's typical of a young quarterback. He looks great, and then he looks terrible.
All right, that's going to do it for today's pod. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll Tide.